Number 1. Luke. This is just the most utterly terrifying thing that I have ever experienced in my life. It has taken me a long time to even share it. I don't really want to say it happened to me though, because technically, I was not the one that had the worst part of the experience. Growing up, I was very close with most of my cousins. We all grew up together and spent a lot of time together. I was the third oldest of the 6 of us. The oldest of us, Luke, was a bit of a jerk. I mean, not all the time, but as he got older, he would definitely have his moments. He was always trying to scare the younger ones, and it was sometimes tedious. He wasn't only the oldest of us, but he was definitely the biggest and the strongest. This happened on one night where our parents all went out. We were over at Luke's house. We had pizza and movies to watch. Luke was 13 at the time, and our youngest cousin was only 7. So, of course, we were only supposed to watch family-friendly movies. But Luke was at that age when he really enjoyed horror movies. He was not supposed to let any of us watch that sort of thing, but once the parents were all gone, he made it quite clear that he was in charge, and that we would be doing whatever he told us to do. This was back in the 1980s, so I absolutely remember the movie we were watching. It was one of the A Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and although it might not be too scary to me anymore, it was definitely terrifying back when I was younger. The 7-year-old, whose name was Tonya, was scared out of her wits. You know how little kids can get when scary movies are on. They want to leave the room, so they do not have to watch them, but they are also too scared to leave the room and be alone. However, at one point, when the movie got a little too intense for her, she got up and ran into the kitchen. We figured it would probably be best to let her remain in the kitchen if she felt comfortable there. I got lost in the movie again, so I wasn't sure how much time had passed before Tonya slowly crept back to the living room. However, she didn't come fully into the room. From the doorframe, she told Luke that she had seen someone in the backyard. When he asked her what she meant, she said she saw the man from the movie we were watching in the backyard. He was opening the door to the shed and went in. Well, of course Luke didn't believe her, and he had to act like a douche about it too. He told her that she had to stop acting like a baby. The movie was not real, and there was nothing to be afraid of. However, she did not drop it. She kept insisting that the man from the movie was in our backyard in the shed. After a while, Luke finally got pretty annoyed with her. And getting up, he paused the movie, and he was obviously not happy about it. He kept mocking her, calling her names such as a big baby and chicken shit. Of course, that just made things worse and caused her to begin crying. The crying just made the bully in him even worse. Luke said he would go outside and make sure there was no one there. As he left, he told her, "Watch out for Freddy, because he'll probably get in here while I'm in the backyard." Other than Tonya, I don't think any of us really thought anyone was back there. However, none of us were as cruel about it as Luke was. Knowing him too, he was just going to take advantage of the fact that Tonya was scared and try to frighten her more. Tonya walked with him to the back door. Luke went out, but she refused to go after him. After the door closed, she ran back into the living room with us. Suddenly, we all heard Luke screaming and pounding on the back door. He was screaming for us to let him in. I knew he was just being a jerk because he could have gotten back in easily. Tonya was scared, but I told her to ignore him. He was just being a jerk. He'll come back in as soon as he realized he couldn't scare her. No. I locked the door when I saw the man grab Luke, she told us. I wasn't sure whether to believe her or not, but I wondered maybe if Luke was actually screaming and not trying to scare her. I got up, ran into the kitchen, and turned on the back light. I saw Luke laying on the ground. Thinking that this could still be a prank, I was about to open the back door, and then I saw a shadow ducking into the trees around the house. There really was someone in the backyard, and he really did attack Luke. I called the police and grabbed a knife before I went out to help Luke get up and get back into the house. He was beaten up pretty bad, but it really wasn't serious. So get this, the man who attacked him was stealing tools out of the shed. He was a drug addict and intended to pawn the tools for money. Apparently, he thought Luke had seen him because Luke was mocking Tonya in the backyard, saying things like, "Oh, someone's in our shed. I guess I'll have to call the cops." You know, it's weird. Although I wouldn't wish what happened to Luke on anyone, he did bring it on himself in a way. Number 2. Discovery. I am writing this story directly because of a story I heard on Killer Orange Cat's channel. It brought the memory back, and I remembered how terrified I was when it originally happened. My parents bought a new house when I was 12 years old. Although the house was nice, I really didn't like it, because it was too far away from any other houses. But my dad had a very stressful job, and I understand that living out here in the country was really helpful to him. As I mentioned, the house was nice. It was a ranch-style house, and it had a huge basement that ran the full length of the house. There were some workbenches, boxes, and a little bit of old furniture that was there right when we moved in. I guess the man who sold my dad the house didn't want it or didn't think to take it. I, for one, found the basement to be very interesting. One of the workbenches had tools on it that looked like they could have been close to 100 years old. There was also a marquee sign with letters that I could use to make silly phrases and light them up. During my first summer vacation in that house, I went down into the basement out of boredom. Well, that, and plus it was much cooler in the basement than anywhere else. I didn't have anyone to do anything with, and my parents were both at work. So in order to keep myself occupied, I decided that I would go through some of the boxes in the basement. I'd never actually done that, and wondered if I might find something entertaining or weird. Most of the stuff in the boxes was pretty mundane, but when I moved some of the boxes aside, I noticed something I had never seen before. There was a tiny door on the wall. It was probably only 3 feet tall. The boxes had never been moved, so I had no idea that it had been there. I figured it was probably nothing significant, but I have to admit being very curious about it. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I went up to my parents' room to see if they had a key I could use, but they didn't. I went back down to the basement. I figured there were a lot of tools down there, so I could find a way to open the little door. So I got a screwdriver and a lever. I was able to take the lever and bend the door a little bit from the frame. Then I used the screwdriver to force the latch open. I'd like to tell you this was the first thing that I did, but it wasn't. I only got that door opened by a lot of trial and error. When I opened the door, I was surprised and a little let down when all I saw inside it was a small metal box. I mean, I didn't really expect treasure, but what 12-year-old doesn't at least hope that he or she will find treasure by accident? I opened up the box and there was a diary in it. It was really good handwriting, but the content of the diary was very disturbing. The diary was written from the perspective of a girl who lived in the house before. Most of it was about her older brother, whom she seemed to be very afraid of. She talked first about whenever he would go out to mow the lawn. Whenever he found snakes in the yard, he would cut them into pieces, using a pair of hedge clippers. He had told her he wanted to see if they would grow into new snakes, like what happened with worms. And he told her that if she ever told their parents, he'd use the clippers on her. Looking deeper into the book, the incidents with her brother just got worse and worse. He went on to do worse things to other animals, things that I do not want to share here. She was worried and scared about him all the time, wondering if he would ever start hurting people. She was too scared to tell anyone, so she wrote it in the book. The worst part was when she mentioned that a girl disappeared. Her body was found a year after her disappearance. She had been killed by a rock to the head. She suspected that her brother had done it, simply because he was friends with the girl and had been hanging out with her around the time it happened. Finally, she said she was too scared that her brother would find the diary, but she didn't want to get rid of it. She was too scared to tell on her brother, but felt that the information about what he had been doing had to be told. So she locked the diary into that room, hoping someone other than her brother would come across it. I showed the book to my parents, but they didn't buy it. They said more than likely someone had written it and put it in there because they wanted to scare whoever found it. They threw it away. I never saw it again. I don't know the name, or the girl, or if she was really murdered, or if she ever even existed. We didn't live in that house very long, and my dad sold it. I never found anything out. Number 3. Telescope. For Christmas when I was 13, I got a small telescope. I was pretty obsessed with space, and I wanted to be an astronomer, so I was thrilled. However, the magnification of the telescope was only about 25 times, so it really wasn't that good for watching the sky. I remember once looking at the moon and realizing that it didn't look much different, so that was a little disappointing. Over the months, however, I did discover another good use for it. I lived in a neighborhood where many of the houses were built on the side of a hill. I was at the top of the hill, and there were tons of houses further down the hill. I found that I could use the telescope to spy on people. The most fascinating thing about it was that no one would have any idea that they were being watched. I can look back on it nowadays and realize what I was doing was wrong. But back then, I was just a young kid, and had a little bit of fun spying on people. Even when people were doing boring things, like unloading their car or mowing the grass, I was still having a good time watching them. Now, of course, it was easiest to use during the day, but there were enough street lights and porch lights in the neighborhood that I could use it at night too. I didn't do it too often though, because there really wasn't much going on at night. But I guess a few times a week, I'd look around before bedtime, on the off chance that I would see something interesting happening. One night, I was up late because it was a weekend. The rest of my family had gone to sleep, so I wasn't going to watch television or anything. I went into my room and sat at my desk doing some reading. I really wasn't too into the reading, so I decided to fool around on my telescope just a little bit. I really didn't expect to see anything, but figured it was a Friday night, so maybe there would at least be some drunk people around. While I was looking around at the various houses, I suddenly saw something that chilled me to the bone. A man was climbing into the side window of a house. It was a house of someone I knew too, my friend Jeff. But I didn't know the man who was climbing in there. The house was dark, and the only reason I was able to even see the man breaking in was because of the faint light from the house next door. Contemplating what to do, I grabbed my phone and dialed Jeff's number. His father answered, groggy, indicating to me that he had just woke up. I continued watching through the telescope to see if the man would leave. I told him who I was, and that I had seen someone sneak into his house. At first, Jeff's dad seemed confused, and then there was the sound of something breaking. Jeff's father was no longer on the phone, and I heard some scuffling over the phone. I hung up on Jeff's dad and called the police. All the while, I kept looking through the telescope to see if I could see anything. I waited, not knowing what was happening. I watched as the cops pulled up to the house. The lights were on, so I could see everything that was happening. The intruder was arrested. I saw them putting him into the car. The police then had to come by and talk to me, trying to figure out how I had known. I had to tell them I saw it through my telescope. The guy who broke into the house was someone they knew. Apparently, there was a big dispute with Jeff's dad as to some money he was owed. And he got impatient and decided to break into the house and steal it. Jeff's dad probably would have slept through the whole thing if I hadn't called him on the phone. It was one of those once-in-a-lifetime coincidences, I guess. I just happened to be looking at the right place at the right time. My antics with the telescope do make me wonder, though. I guess you can never be sure who is really watching you at any time. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I thought with this hot summer going on, we could use a nice set of winter stories to cool off with, and I hope it did the job. If you want to read print versions of these stories, you can do that at the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided in the description. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider subscribing by using the button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to submit it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.